Hey friends, how's it going? In this video, I'm going to recap from 2018 titled, Everybody Knows. Before we get to the storyline, I'd like to wish everyone happy and great day. Without further ado, let's get straight to the storyline. The movie opens in a small Spanish village, where a mysterious person is seen cutting out newspaper clippings about a missing girl. Not far away, we see a woman named Ana, driving her older sister Laura and her 2 children, who has just arrived from Argentina. On the way, the family speaks with Laura's husband, Alejandro, who tells Ana that he regrets not being able to attend her wedding. Elsewhere, a local man named Paco returns home from the grape harvest and meets with his wife, Bia, and the two appear deeply in love. Shortly after, Laura's family arrives at a local hotel, owned by their oldest sister, Mariana. Ana then introduces Laura to her fiancé, who has also just arrived with his family. The family heads inside, where Laura greets her father, Antonio, who is overjoyed to see his daughter after so long. Sometime later, Laura's teenage daughter, Irene, goes to hang out with a local boy named Felipe. The two are then seen riding his motorcycle at full speed along a rural road. They almost collide with another car, which turns out to be driven by Paco and Bea. Paco recognizes Felipe, who turns out to be his nephew, but he wonders who the new girl is. Meanwhile, Laura chats with Mariana and her husband Fernando, who says they aren't doing well financially and barely make enough to pay off their loan. Laura then meets with Mariana's daughter Rocio, who works at the hotel and has a little daughter. Rocio reveals that her husband Gabriel went to Germany to look for work and that they are separating. Afterward, Laura meets Paco and Bea on the street and greets them excitedly as she and Paco are old friends. Then, Irene arrives while speeding on a motorcycle with Felipe, which worries Laura. She quickly stops the teenagers and introduces her daughter to Paco. The scene then cuts to the wedding day, where the local church is filled with the entire village. Meanwhile, Irene and Felipe climb up to the church tower, during which he nervously kisses her. They notice some inscriptions on the wall that say LP, so Felipe explains that it was Laura and Paco who wrote them, as they used to be very much in love, and that apparently everyone in the town knows. Irene is shocked to hear this, and makes Felipe write their initials as well. After the wedding, everyone leaves the church and moves on to the party at home, where they dance and drink joyfully. During the celebration, Irene suddenly feels dizzy and unwell, so Laura takes her to bed and gives her an inhaler. The rest of the guests continue dancing downstairs, right when the power goes out due to the heavy rain. Paco then takes his nephew and heads to fetch a generator from his estate. Later, the newlyweds cut their cake by candlelight and flashlights when, thanks to the generator, the lights suddenly come back on. But when Laura goes to brush her teeth, she notices that Irene is not in bed and that the bathroom door is locked. Irene doesn't answer her, so she urgently seeks help from Paco, who forces the bathroom door open, but shockingly, no one is there. They search frantically for Irene, and on her bed, they find newspaper clippings about the kidnapping shown in the opening scene. Next, Paco goes out to search for Irene outside, while Laura desperately tries to reach her by phone, but their efforts are futile. Not long after, Laura shockingly receives a text claiming that they have her daughter and that she will be killed if the police are alerted. This sends her into a panic, so she immediately shows the message to her family and to Paco. Paco says the kidnappers can't be far, so he, Laura, Fernando, and Bea get into a car and start driving around. On the way, they run into workers from the electric company who explain that someone has cut the cable, so they're trying to repair it. Upon not finding Irene anywhere, a panicked Laura breaks down in tears, so Bea suggests calling the police. But Paco reminds them of the newspaper clippings they saw at the house and worries it might be the same kidnapper. It turns out that back then, the kidnappers asked the family not to contact the police, and when they did, they killed the poor girl. With no other option, they return home and conclude that someone must have spiked Irene's drink, meaning the culprit had to be a guest at the party. They even question Felipe, but he insists he has no idea about Irene's whereabouts. Paco believes the kidnapper is a professional who planned everything in advance, orchestrated the power outage, and knew that Laura was arriving from Argentina. The family urges Laura to rest for the night, but she instead reads the articles about the previous kidnapping and weeps in despair. The next morning, the wedding guests who came from abroad leave, while Paco arrives to check on Laura and urges her to call Alejandro. With no other choice, Laura finally calls her husband, but she breaks down in tears and can't speak, so Paco has to step in. Later, Laura wonders why, among all the kids at the wedding, the kidnapper had to take her daughter. Mariana thinks maybe it's because she's the only one with enough money to pay the ransom. But Laura reveals that they are struggling financially, as Alejandro has been out of work for 2 years. In the afternoon, Paco is at his vineyard when Bea arrives and, shockingly, shows him a text message from the kidnapper demanding 300,000 euros. He finds it odd that she received the message. So Bea points out that maybe it's because Paco is too involved in the case. Paco immediately calls Laura to inform her, but it turns out she has also received the same text, so he rushes out to see her, which annoys his wife. Sometime later, Paco arrives to see Laura, but shockingly, her father Antonio begins insulting him for acting like a family. He rudely reminds Paco that he is the son of his servant and orders him to know his place. He claims that Paco owes them more than anyone else in the town and reminds him how he forced Laura to sell the land, on which Paco now has his vineyard. Just then, Laura arrives, and Paco asks her if he had forced her to sell the land. It turns out that many years ago she was in desperate need of money, so she sold her land to Paco for below its market value. Laura makes it clear to her family that no one tricked or pressured her. She willingly sold the land because of her financial need, and Paco, who didn't have much, gave her what he could. In the afternoon, Fernando takes Paco and Laura to meet his friend Jorge, who is a retired policeman. They show him the wedding video and the text messages, but Jorge warns that tracing the kidnappers will be difficult since they use fake IDs for the SIM cards and destroy both the phones and cards after each message. Since the family is unwilling to involve the police, Jorge advises them to act as if they are gathering the ransom money, which will buy them some crucial time. Later, Jorge speaks with Laura privately and asks when she first met Paco. She explains that they grew up in the same house and were always together until she moved to Argentina. She also admits they were in love back then, but now their lives have taken different paths. Later, Paco goes to meet his business partner and tells him he urgently needs money to deal with a personal crisis. The man refuses, but Paco insists he is even willing to sell half of his share of the vineyard. The man is stunned and says he will think about it, but Paco insists that it is urgent and storms out. When he returns to the car, he finds Laura in a state of panic as she has received another text. Paco's phone rings, and it's Bea, who has received the same chilling message. The kidnapper is warning that Irene is unwell and can't breathe, so they're demanding that the family prepare the ransom before she dies. That night, Laura wakes in the middle of the night and realizes her phone is missing. She heads downstairs and finds Alejandro reading the text messages, after which the couple tearfully embraces each other. The next morning, the couple drives up to the police station, but dares not enter for fear that something could happen to their daughter. Later at home, the family discusses their next move, and Laura tells them that Paco is considering selling his land to help. Then, Alejandro privately asks why Paco would go to such lengths for them, and she reveals that he is only pretending to sell to spread the word that they are gathering the money. In the afternoon, Laura takes Alejandro to a secluded place where they meet Paco and Fernando. Jorge is in a nearby car but wants to speak to Alejandro alone. He asks why Alejandro didn't come to attend the wedding, to which the man responds that he had several job interviews, which he didn't get. Jorge asks if it was because of drinking, but Alejandro assures him that he hasn't touched alcohol in 16 years. Suddenly, Jorge brings up his bankruptcy and begins to suspect him of the kidnapping, which offends Alejandro, causing him to storm off. Next, Alejandro angrily asks Fernando if he was the one who told Jorge about the drinking and his financial troubles. Fernando denies it, while Alejandro furiously pulls his wife away from there. On the way home, Laura explains that it was she who told Jorge all of this, because she believed he could help them. But this only enrages Alejandro further, and he's frustrated that her whole family suspects him in the face of his own daughter's kidnapping. That evening, Laura approaches her distressed husband and says that, if he agrees, she can ask Paco for the money. She tells him she is willing to do anything to get their daughter back, and if Paco won't give it, they can go to the police. But Alejandro doesn't believe Paco will give them such a large sum, and asks her not to take this step. The next day, Laura goes to see Paco and asks if he is willing to sell the land for real. He says he doesn't know, since many people work there, and their families depend on it. This distresses her, so she accuses him of still not having forgiven her for leaving him. She then reminds him of the time she returned from Argentina after getting married, when they hadn't seen each other for 3 years. It turns out Paco wasn't with Bea back then, and he drove her to the airport, but halfway there he stopped and broke into tears over losing Laura. They then got out of the car and made love one last time before parting ways. In a shocking twist, Laura reveals to Paco that Irene is his daughter, which leaves him stunned. He refuses to believe it, but she insists she is telling the truth and walks out, during which he runs into Bea outside. Later, Bea asks Paco what Laura wanted, and he replies that she needs his help with the money because of their land issues. Later, Paco and Bea go to see Laura's family and find everyone at the dining table. Bea takes the opportunity to express that they are very upset, as the family still believes they have claims on the land. The conversation escalates into an argument, and Alejandro finally says that he doesn't need anyone's money, since it is his daughter at stake. Afterwards, Alejandro asks Laura what she told Paco, to which she responds that she told him everything. It turns out he is also aware of Irene's paternity, and he scolds his wife for revealing it, since they had promised to keep it a secret. Later, Paco spends the night restless, and Bea is too worried to watch him like this. He tells her he plans to sell his land, as he fears what might happen to the girl. Bea objects fiercely, leaving Paco with no choice but to confess that Irene is his daughter, which he only learned a day ago. This distresses Bea, and she's convinced that Laura is fabricating the story to get the money. She begins to suspect that the whole family might have orchestrated the kidnapping to fool Paco, but he doesn't think so. In the next scene, Jorge arrives at the house, and Laura explains that her little son was sleeping in the same room as Irene that night. Jorge finds it strange that they didn't abduct the boy, which would have been easier than taking Irene. He reveals that Fernando told him about Irene's real father. As it turns out, Bea had spoken to Fernando about it. Jorge theorizes that whoever kidnapped the girl knew she was Paco's daughter, and may have assumed that even if the family couldn't afford the ransom, Paco would step in. A stunned Alejandro insists they hadn't told anyone, so Jorge urges them to keep a close watch on their surroundings. Later, Alejandro speaks with Fernando and learns that Paco has already sold his land. Alejandro worries about what people might gossip about, so Fernando reluctantly reveals that people were already suspicious about the truth. It turns out that Irene used to do some things that reminded them of Paco when he was a child. Fernando says they hadn't mentioned anything for a long time, but when they saw Paco trying to sell the land, the rumors were confirmed. Elsewhere, Bea asks Paco if he still loves Laura, but he insists he is doing this only for the girl, which she doesn't believe. Later, the family watches the wedding video again to look for clues, right when Paco comes to tell them that he has gathered the money. Alejandro speaks to him privately and reveals how he used to be an alcoholic and depressed, but Irene's birth saved him. He says that when Laura told him she was pregnant with Paco's baby, she wanted to have an abortion, but he convinced her to keep it. He believes God pulled him out of hell and is sure God will protect Irene again and refuses the money. And so Paco angrily tells him that maybe God is using him to save her, and then storms out. Later, Laura scolds Alejandro, saying that he is risking their daughter's life because of his pride. He begins to speak about God, but she angrily states that if his God truly wanted to save her, he would have done it already. That night, we see Laura's niece, Rocio, driving to a river. After crossing it, she arrives at a cabin where her husband Gabriel and his accomplice Luis are residing. It is at this point that we learn that all three of them orchestrated Irene's kidnapping, but Rocio tells them she can't go on, as they are destroying her family. Gabriel urges her to hold out until the next day, assuring her that even if they are caught, they will leave out her involvement. But she begs them to let Irene go immediately and breaks down in tears. Upon her insistence, Gabriel promises that he will release the girl as soon as dawn breaks, and Rocio makes him swear it on their daughter. When Rocio returns home, Mariana asks why it took her so long and what the doctor said. Rocio replies that it's just a virus, but Mariana asks why her pants are wet, to which Rocio claims that she had to stop to vomit on the road. But Mariana also notices that her shoes are muddy, which makes her suspicious. That night, Paco wakes to a message in which Irene is begging to be saved, and saying that they plan to kill her today. The panicked man quickly grabs the money and rushes out, which wakes up Bea as well. She considers calling the police, but eventually changes her mind. At dawn, Paco arrives at the location provided by the kidnappers, which turns out to be a bridge. He calls out to them, shouting that he is here with the money, but demands to see Irene first. And then suddenly, Paco immediately heads there, but doesn't find anything in the river. However, when he returns to the car, he finds the money bag is gone, but spots Irene in the back seat, tied up and gagged. A wave of relief crashes over him, and he asks her if they did anything to her. The loving father quickly puts his jacket over her and gently kisses her forehead before untying her. Shortly after, Alejandro and Laura arrive to meet Paco, and the couple embrace and kiss their daughter in overwhelming relief. Alejandro thanks Paco for everything, assuring him that he will return the money. Later, Rocio is making a bed when she overhears her family celebrating that they found Irene. Elsewhere, an exhausted Paco returns home but finds Bea missing, which implies that she has decided to leave him. On the other hand, Irene returns home, where her family surrounds her and tearfully hugs her in relief. Here, Mariana notices Irene's muddy shoes and realizes the truth, which leaves her in shock. She looks at her daughter with quiet disappointment, but doesn't say anything. In the next scene, Laura's family prepares to return to Argentina, and Felipe promises to call Irene when she gets home. In the car, Irene asks Alejandro why it was Paco who rescued her, but he remains silent. After bidding a heartfelt farewell to the family, they drive toward the airport, leaving the nightmare behind. In the final scene, Mariana is sitting alone in the town square when her husband Fernando approaches, urging her that it's time to return home. But she asks him to sit beside her, saying she has something important to tell him. As their conversation begins, and with that friends, this story comes to an end. Tell us in the comments how you like the explanation. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.